Welcome back. The annual remembrance of the terrorist attack, which occurred on September 11th, 2001, is always a difficult time for me personally, and I know it is for many in this region. One very close friend, Michelle Heidenberger, was killed when American Airlines Flight 77 was flown into the Pentagon, and I was acquaintances with two others that were also on that flight. This year, because of the controversy over the retreat from Afghanistan, those memories are particularly painful. Mike, how are Americans in general supposed to think about what happened 20 years ago and try to put it in the context of current events?
It's a difficult question. I have similar remembrances. I have a cousin who passed away in the World Trade Center, and so it's always a difficult time for our family as well. But it's I think 20 years ago it showed a vulnerability into the U.S. that we didn't realize happened. That was there. That we never expected that there could be an attack on American soil, rightly or wrongly. And I think over the course of the last 20 years and the evolution of international affairs and the changing world dynamics and I think with the pullout of Afghanistan over the course of the past few weeks, but even just how that war has been administered and what we've seen successes and where we haven't, show that vulnerability is real and continues to exist, and that the role that perhaps we thought, rightly or wrongly, that the U.S. played in the world isn't exactly what many of us thought it was. And so the challenge is how do we address that vulnerability? How do we recognize that vulnerability? And then how do we begin to address it? And I think that's the challenge. And so I think that's the challenge we all have is to address that vulnerability and then figure out individually and collectively to move forward from it.
Mark, I'm going to ask you the same question, which is, how do we put this into context? There's, 20 years have passed. There was, as Mike pointed out, we recognized that there was external threats that existed, and we tried to take action against them. But are we retreating from that perseverance now, given the way that Afghanistan was handled in the evacuations?
Well, the comparison that strikes me is the sort of unity, how we as a country came together, and some of the divides, the boundaries, the divisions, the schisms that existed really we recognized it as being just nowhere near as important as what we shared together as a common people. And people shared that view around the world as well. And there was a unity that came of that. And certainly it's not something we have right now. We don't certainly even have it with COVID. I mean, that we were arguing, and we really have a lot of division. And I think that's a shame and it's a tragedy, and it's also kind of a reminder of how when we get divided like that, as we are now, how debilitating it can be when we feel as though we have to question the leadership, the credibility of leaders in various positions, and not feel comfortable with the answers they're giving and the direction that they're suggesting.
Well, I mean, I know that there are those who feel there's a great sense of betrayal of returning power to the Taliban, who fostered the ability for the 9/11 attacks to be launched against our country. I mean, I can understand that feeling.
Well, my son served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and his observation is the area that he served in has been back under Taliban rule for the last 5 or 6 years. So this happened very suddenly, but it has also been a slow motion process for quite some time.
And I think it's interesting too that you make that point, Casey. And there are a lot of folks who want to say that the withdrawal was the thing. Well, the reality is that the previous administration had negotiations with the Taliban, which provided them legitimacy. This has been an interesting scenario because we've had presidents from both parties engaged in this entire process, and at the end of the day, no matter which side we were on, we never managed to advance the ball particularly far down the field. And so I think to Mark's point on the collective nature of where we need to be, how do we come together, I think we should look at that and say, okay, where are we and where do we want to be, as opposed to kind of looking back and going, wow, they screwed up or they screwed up. clearly we as a country did not achieve the outcome that we desired, and we had both parties participating in leadership at different times in that process, and nobody advanced the ball particularly far.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike. I mean, frankly, I'm critical of the Trump administration for engaging in those negotiations as well. My own personal view, but I mean, I think you have to acknowledge that it was an intractable situation that needed some resolution at some point, and it's hard to come to grips with the fact that the same group that were in control of Afghanistan when the 9/11 attacks were launched are now back in control. For me personally, that's it. We're getting the wrap sign, so we're going to go on to parting shots when we come back from this short break.